brief final remarks. So let's start to consider the total primary energy supply, so the bulk energy that is used by Croatia altogether. And if you look to the numbers, they are around 350 petajoule per year. If we compare that with Europe, is less than 1%, around 0.5% of the European total primary energy supply, and is 14% of the Western Balkans. But so it's a very small share. But if we look in terms of total primary energy supply per capita for each inhabitant of Croatia, the number is 70 gigajoule for each person. That is almost 30% lower than the European Union, 35% lower than Germany, and 30% lower than the Western Balkans. So altogether, in absolute value, is small. But if you compare with the other countries, is even smaller in terms of per capita total primary energy supply. And this reflects a bit the different level of economic development, industrialization, and urbanization of the different countries. If we look briefly to the energy commodities that are at the basis of the energy mix for Croatia, you see that fossil fuels play a major role, around 70%, and they are shared between oil and natural gas, basically. Solid fuels is a very small share. And so more or less we have 40% of oil and 25% of natural gas. What is good is that the renewable energy sources account for around 30% in Croatia, although a large share of this 30% is characterized by solid biofuels, and we'll see in a moment which are the drawbacks of this situation. Electricity, and here we mean the electricity that is imported, so we account for electricity in terms of total primary energy supplies only for the share of electricity that is imported across the interconnectors of the transmission system of Croatia. So the conclusion is, of course, there is still a high reliance on fossil fuels, despite the fact that we have a very good share of renewables. In this table, there is a kind of comparison between different indicators, and we compare with Western Balkans, with European Union as a whole, and we compare with France, Germany, Italy, just to have a reference. Of course, we compare per unit values. So the total primary energy supply per capita, we already mentioned it. We compare the energy intensity, that is how many terajoules, or how many units of energy I need to use to produce 1 euro of my welfare, of my gross domestic product. And in these terms, you see that Croatia has a value that is not so high. Then we have a comparison in terms of the share of fossil fuels and of the share of renewables in the total primary energy supply, and we look to the sustainability dimension in terms of CO2 emission and carbon intensity. So carbon intensity is how many kilos of CO2 I emit to produce 1 euro of my gross domestic product. So to summarize this table, despite the lower total primary energy supplies per capita, Croatia, like the other Balkan countries, show high energy intensity, higher than the one for the European Union. You see, it's lower than the Western Balkans, but it's higher than European Union, France, Germany, and Italy. So higher energy intensity, and so there are opportunities for improvement in the energy efficiency of the economic productive system. If we move a little bit forward, we can still reduce this value. Croatian energy mix is improving its environmental sustainability with a very high level of renewable penetration, with reference to other Balkan countries, but also with reference to the other European member states. So Croatia is doing very well in this sector. You see, we have 27, 19 for the Western Balkans, and we have 19 as well for Italy, 18 for Germany, 14 for France. However, and this is the caveat we need probably to do, in the rest penetration, a relevant role is played by the solid biomass in residential space heating, and that can have as a drawback a possible problem in terms of air pollution. If you look to the particulate matter PM10 in 2022, the value in Croatia per capita was more or less double than the European Union values. And for PM 2.5 was about 2.5 times. So this is very good. It's renewable, very high share, but there might be this small problem related to the 3 types of renewables that are used. Let's have a brief look in this overview to the energy infrastructure. So 3 main energy infrastructure: electricity, gas, and oil. The electricity infrastructure has around 8,000 kilometers of transmission lines and 150,000 kilometers of distribution lines. Is interconnected with Slovenia, Hungary, Serbia, and BiH. So we have 4 different interconnectors that are exactly the interconnectors through which Croatia gets the 5% of total primary energy supply in terms of electricity. The gas infrastructure is crucial: 2,500 kilometers of transmission network, 20,000 kilometers of distribution network, 2 interconnections with Slovenia and Hungary. And what is very important is the regasification terminal that basically is in charge of providing 85% of the gas import to Croatia in terms of LNG, liquefied natural gas. For the oil infrastructure, there are 650 kilometers of pipelines in the north, what is called Adria pipeline, with interconnection with the different countries, Slovenia, Hungary, BiH, and then Serbia. The renovation of electricity in infrastructure is on the agenda of the Croatian government. In terms of electricity infrastructure, the 6% of the 2030 funds of the Integrated National Energy Climate Plan for Croatia, and around 9% in 9% in 2050 and 6% in 2030 are devoted to reinforcement of the electricity infrastructures. In terms of gas infrastructure, in 2030, around 5% of the funds will be devoted to strengthen this important infrastructure. Let's have a look basically to the targets for the country. So let's see the targets for 2030. There are ambitious targets, reasonable low ambition targets. Reduction of greenhouse gases emission in 2030 with respect to 2005. You see here we have the European targets for ETS, emission trading system. So are all the sectors that are covered by the European mechanism of price and cap for the emission of CO2, for which there is a European market, is minus 62%. For the sector outside the ETS, 16%. In Croatia, in the national plan, the one that is called WAM with additional measures, so the most ambitious of the 2 levels that are covered by this plan. For the TX sector, we speak about minus 50%, and for the non-ETS sector is 17%. In terms of the renewable, the share of renewables, 42% in gross final consumption, 73% in electricity consumption, 47% in building consumption, mainly for heating and cooling, 20% in the transportation sector. If you look to the investment, those are the targets in terms of the, let's say, KPIs we want to achieve. In terms of the investment by 2030-2050, there is an estimation of additional investment needed of there are more than 100 billions of euros, 35 billions in the period 2024-2030. That means around 5 billions of euro per year, and 80 billions of euros from 2031 to 2050, something around 4